Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Legacy Day conversation, Legacies of Education and the Black Experience at Washington College and in Kent County. My name is Tara Gladden, and I am the Gallery Director and Curator for the Cole Gallery at Washington College. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to take a moment to offer an outline of the event, some brief background information of how today's event developed, make some important acknowledgements, and introduce our panel. To give you an idea of the scope of today's event, we will start with my introductions, move on to a presentation by artist Jason Patterson, joined by collaborator Jalen Money. After that, we'll have a moderated conversation followed by Q&A. To offer some brief background information on today's event, Star Center Frederick Douglass Fellow Jason Patterson and I have been working together for the past year to develop a Cole Gallery exhibition and interpretive programming in support of the Frederick Douglass Fellowship work he's completed over the past 2 years. This project, titled Jason Patterson on the Black History of Washington College and Kent County, was awarded a 2020 Chesapeake Heartland Staff Faculty Fellowship, and today's event has grown out of this fellowship work. That said, we have received an incredible amount of support from both Washington College and the Chestertown community. But there are a few people I'd like to thank in particular. I'll begin with Patrick Nugent and Airlie Johnson, our Chesapeake Heartland mentors who have been so generous with their time, ideas, and guidance, not only in the formation of today's talk, but also in support of the project as a whole. Also, at Sumner Hall, we'd like to thank Ruth Shoge, whose early guidance contributed to our Chesapeake Heartland application, and in turn, this conversation. And Gordon Wallace, who has helped coordinate the tech side of today's event, along with Gina Ralston and Mike Cavina at Washington College, who set up today's webinar. Finally, we thank the Legacy Day Committee, who so generously invited us to be a part of today's event. This event could not have happened without the collaborative efforts of every single person involved, which of course leads me to our incredible panel, which is a true honor for me to introduce. I'll begin with artist Jason Patterson. Jason's work focuses on African-American history, highlighting the role the past has in cultivating our current political and social conditions. Patterson's practice is research-based, with much of his studio time dedicated to that research to ensure that the historical and social narratives in the work are well represented. His figurative work is based on archived images, investigating the different ways images structure how we visually comprehend our history and define our present. This project presents a curated chronology of the African-American experience in Kent County and at Washington College from the late 18th century up to the present. While it looks critically at histories of slavery, white supremacy, and racial injustice as related to the college, town, and county, it also celebrates achievements of Washington College students and African-American Kent County community leaders and activists. The project confronts and contemplates many important issues, such as today's topic of discussion, education, and the Black experience. I'll stop there because Jason will give you a more complete introduction to this work in just a few minutes before we move on to the conversation. In addition to the visual artworks, Jason has been collaborating with another panel member, Jalen Money, to craft a series of interpretive essays that will be included in an online exhibition of the project opening on the Chesapeake Heartland website this October. Jalen Terrell Money is a descendant of America's founding Black families in both Talbot and Kent counties. As an author, a screenwriter, a scholar, and a public servant, he is working to ensure the living legacies of Tidewater communities across the Chesapeake, particularly on Maryland's Eastern Shore. In 2015, Jalen graduated from Easton High School in Easton, Maryland, and went on to graduate from Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, with a degree in political science, Africana studies, leadership studies, and environmental studies. He is a regional director in the U.S. Senate, working to champion a better quality of life for all Marylanders. Despite his professional commitments on the Western Shore, weekly worship with the Bethel AME Church of Chestertown has remained a more devotion. Our conversation moderator and pastor of Mount Olive AME Church in Wharton, Maryland, Reverend Monique Davis, was raised in the African Methodist Episcopal Church and is affectionately known as Reverend M, Reverend Mo, or Pastor Mo. Reverend Davis has a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting and a Master of Business Administration from Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware. She also holds a Master of Divinity from Palmer Theological Seminary in St. David's, Pennsylvania, and she is a lifetime member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and a lifetime member of Tau Beta Sigma National Honorary Band Sorority. Panelist Carolyn K Irwin graduated from Washington College in 1970 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in English Literature. She was the 5th Black student to graduate from Washington College after the college ended its almost 200-year history of racial segregation. Carolyn completed her postgraduate studies at the American University and Howard University, earning a master's degree in organizational communication from Howard University in 1975. While at Washington College, Carolyn was on the staff of the campus newspaper, The Elm. With The Elm as her platform, Carolyn wrote a letter to the editor in 1968 questioning the college's lack of diversity. Increasing the college's minority enrollment became her mission, and by her junior year, Washington College enrolled a record number of 8 African-American students in the same class. In 1969, together with the late Bill Ennett, class of 1972, and Ricky Turner, also class of 72, Carolyn launched the first African-American Student Association at Washington College. Panelist Jocelyn Elmore is an Eastern Shore native and a recent Washington College 2020 graduate. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Business Management and Hispanic Studies. While at Washington College, she was the president of the Black Student Union, as well as the director of annual events for the Student Events Board. Jocelyn was also involved in Cleopatra's Sisters, a former George's General tour guide, and most importantly, an advocate for many students on campus. In June, she began an internship at the Surface Combat Systems Center at NASA in Wallops Island, Virginia. Finally, panelist Darius Johnson is a graduate of both Kent County High School and Washington College. Darius comes from a family full of history buffs and finds himself practicing the art of oral history every time he returns home for holidays or cookouts. Through recent research into local land records and family documents, he discovered he is the descendant of both the original settlers of Butlertown, Maryland, and Joseph Wicks, one of the area's first settlers and slave owners. Grappling with this complex heritage inspires him to use history as a tool for growth and progress. Darius currently serves as Communications Director for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy. So as you can hear, we have an amazing group of panelists with us today with so much knowledge and so much to offer. I thank you all for being here today and sharing your stories and perspectives. So now I hand things over to Jason Patterson to introduce you to his work before we move on to the conversation.
Thanks, Tara. Great introductions. So right now what I'm going to do is show you guys a preview of the work that I've completed so far. It's not all the work that I've completed so far, but it's work that will be particularly related to what we're going to talk about today. So as Tara mentioned, I started this project about 2 years ago as a fellow at Star Center. And it's been one of the most incredible works that I've done. One thing that I want to make clear is this work isn't done now. And when this project is done, this will not be a complete history of the county and of the college. I mean, there's so much more to keep going into, and I hope that this inspires people to look more into the history of the county and the college, because there's so much untapped, really interesting history that will really inform us on the past as much as it informs us about our current conditions. So right now I'm going to do a screen share and walk you guys through some of the work that I've been doing. Okay. So we'll start here in this. So this are 3 portraits of the first 3 African-American graduates from Washington College. The first graduate would be Thomas Morris. Now he graduated in 1962, which, to contextualize this school was founded in 1782. So that meant it took 180 years for the college to graduate an African American. And I think that's important to understand how the first Black graduates at this college, which I should point out, and many of you probably know, is the oldest American college, meaning it's the first college that was chartered after the American Revolution. So this is the oldest American school that took this much time for it to have its graduates. I mean, it's wonderful that we have Carolyn here, who is the 5th graduate, and she can share her stories and the time that she spent here. Go through these really quickly. Also, all 3 of these, I should point out, all 3 of these first graduates were remarkable students and community members and went on to do really interesting things. They were all worked in STEM, essentially, and were amazing at Washington College and outside. Thomas Morris, being from Baltimore, went back to Baltimore and became a math teacher for the rest of his life in the community and was very prominent in that way. Patricia Godbolt, her sort of significant history actually started before she came to Washington College, where she was in Virginia. She was the first African-American graduate of an integrated school in the state of Virginia, and high school graduate, which is pretty remarkable. And then Shirley Dale Patterson was again a remarkable student and was very involved in her time at Washington College, as all 3 of these students were. But what's specifically significant about her after she graduated from Washington College is related to the college is that she was the first African-American member of the college's visitors and governors. Going through that. So this next piece touches on sort of the darker side of the college's history. What this is a image that I took, essentially remade verbatim out of the school yearbook. This is from 1957. And what this is it's a portrait it's in Smith Hall, in the theater in Smith Hall, and it is a photograph of the Kappa Alpha fraternity in blackface doing a performance of a Black church service. As you can see when I get here, this is the caption that was in the yearbook, and it's Kappa Alphas and Rev as in Reverend Doug Gates. Doug Gates was in 1957 was a sophomore in the college and a member of the Kappa Alpha fraternity, which is now this piece is a little bit more significant considering the news of the Kappa Alphas at Washington College deciding to no longer to dissolve the fraternity due to its history. The other example of blackface that I came across in the school yearbooks has a little less information behind it as far as I've been able to find, but it is, this again is verbatim what I found in the yearbook. This was 1961. And it's just the caption was the minstrel show revisited. And that was all the information that was given to it. But again, it's seemingly, again, in Smith Hall, and it's a group of male students in blackface recreating a minstrel performance. What's specific about this one that should be noted is, I believe, Patricia Godbolt or at least Thomas Morris were students at this time, and they were the only Black students at this time. So I can't imagine what something like this would be being kind of by yourself on campus in a time like this. So this piece is, in this group of images that I'm sharing with you guys, is probably the deepest historical significance. What it is it's a document that was given or was shown to me by Dr. Nugent at the Starr Center, but it's a piece of history that Dr. Carol Wilson at the college came across in the Maryland archive. But as you can see here, what it is it's from 1845, and it's a sheriff's sale for the sort of a acquisition or the sort of seizing of a man named William P. Cox's property because he owed debts that he wasn't paying. So this sheriff seized some of his property. This advertisement, which was published in the newspaper, was to advertise that children that he enslaved were being sold, but specifically points out that they're being sold so that the profits can go to the college, Washington College, to pay debts he owed the college. So this is a direct relationship on paper of the college profiting off of enslavement. I mean, we know, of course, slave owners sent their sons to this college, so we know that the school did profit, but this is a very direct and clear example of that connection. And I recreated this on a piece of blank vintage paper, and it's a verbatim recreation. Another image of it. So this, I believe, is the last image on this list. So I think this would go for most Kent County natives who would probably will know who the Garnett School is, the Henry Highland Garnett Elementary School. But before it was the elementary school, in the early 20th century up through integration, it was the K through 12 segregated African American school. Sort of the patriarch of that school was Elmer Hawkins. Elmer Hawkins was the principal of the school and sort of like really took it into his hands to create a good education for the African American community in Kent County. Not only was he the president of the Garnett School, but he was also in the 50s was the president of the American Teachers Association. So this piece I found in doing research and found through Google Books, but it's an ad from Jet Magazine in 1955. As the president of the American Teachers Association, they are giving a donation to the NAACP, to help their efforts in education and general efforts in bringing racial equality. What's super amazing about this image is you have this important Kent County and Chestertown educational figure, if not the most important, when we're talking about African American history. But he's there with Thurgood Marshall, who, as we know, was the first African American Supreme Court justice. But he was also, before that, was the lead counsel of the NAACP. So that's who the check is being presented to. So these are the images of the pieces I have done so far that are really related to the conversation that we're going to have today. Another thing that I want to talk about is contextualizing this kind of work. I mean, especially when we're talking about the darker sides of things. I mean, everybody wants to see images like this of like good historical things, but when we talk about like these images of blackface or the recreation of the ad for enslaved children, to me, it's really important to have that context. So with most of my work, but especially with this project, what I've planned on doing and am in the midst of is writing essays for, if not every piece, like groups of pieces that are closely related. I am not the best writer. I think I'm an okay writer, but, and also this is a lot of work. So I took it upon myself to sort of find, I shouldn't say I should say that he kind of like landed in my lap to use a terrible analogy, but Jalen Monet I met through our mutual friend and a great supporter of mine, Richard Marks in Easton, sent me Jalen's senior thesis essentially about the Eastern Shore, about the history, about the political history, about how to do political and social reform on the Eastern Shore. The way that this essay, this thesis read was exactly what I'm trying to do. So I asked Jalen to join me and help me write this project. And I expected maybe a little reluctance, or I needed to make a stronger sale, but he was very enthusiastic. And so far it's been a great relationship and a great collaboration, despite the fact that we can't really be in the same place because of the pandemic. But I think right now what I'd like to do is hand it over to Jalen and let him say what this project and his sort of side of the project means to him, and talk about the writing we've done so far and what we'll do in the near future when we get through this project. So I'll give you the floor, Jalen.
Well, thank you, Jason. I think all of that has been really generous. And as you all can see, Jason is very talented at what he's doing artistically. And for those of us that have been living in the Chesapeake, or just the Chesapeake in the context of America, a lot of what we know about the country and what we can see as the country to be started here. And I've had the privilege of growing up in Chestertown and spending at least one day a week on North College Avenue in distance of the college, but attending Bethel AME Church of Chestertown. And I think what's grounded me the most in this project is Jason's accuracy from what he's able to find through archives and what he's able to put into context artistically, but also truth, and truth with a capital T. And just as much as we have our factual information, interpretation, and just the embracement of some of this history is also needed in this project. So I was head over heels when I had the opportunity to collaborate with you, Jason. And I think it'll speak volumes, not only of ancestral dreams deferred, but Black and Indigenous voices of color that are misrepresented, underrepresented, or just flat out missing from our narrative of Chestertown, of Kent County, and in America. And I think through writing, this has definitely been an interesting experience. As you all will see come October, some things do carry over in translation and others don't. But I think in prose, we're able to justify and dignify some of these human lives and the legacies of their families, and quite frankly, the family that they had to make on Washington College's campus.
Okay, so thank you both for sharing that information. And again, welcome to everyone this afternoon. And so this is just the first of 3 community conversations that we're going to be having. And so today our conversation begins on the eve of the historic 4-0 vote of the Chestertown Council to adopt the powerful words of Black Lives Matter and We Can't Breathe as the town's legal stance against anti-racism, and to begin reconciling with the Black community of Chestertown and in part the Black community of Kent County, who in differing ways have suffered because of their ancestors were brought to and bought off the docks of the Chester River just a few centuries ago, with the challenge to overcome the systems that disenfranchised and oppressed them for years. As we know, the approved street murals with the words Black Lives Matters and We Can't Breathe, along with the statement Chestertown Unites Against Racism, underneath them was met with opposition. The one to be placed on College Avenue, which borders Washington College, had no issues. However, the mural to be placed on High Street did. A claim of opposition was about protecting the charm of the historic district, a historic district that was built on the backs and soaked with the blood of slaves, brought involuntarily to build a community, town, county, and college to which we have the privilege of being a part of then, now, and going forward. So to all the panelists, how does this historic vote impact you as an artist, collaborator, writer, activist, graduate of Washington College, and a native of Kent County, Maryland, and the conversation we are having here today?
Well, it certainly isn't a characteristic of the Chestertown that I came to know back in 1966. I had never been to Chestertown, heard of Chestertown, or been on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, even though I'm a native Marylander. I was born in Baltimore. I spent practically all of my life there until I graduated from college and went on to other places. But I am, in a sense, gratified to see change in that community. Because when I came, I experienced discrimination and racism for the first time in my life when I came to the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and specifically Chestertown. In fact, the town had a name for me, I found out in a curious way. They called me the Black at the college. And that was to distinguish me from the native Blacks in the town, because I was known for stepping out of bounds a bit and doing things in the town that were not necessarily the norm for the local Blacks. I'll give you an example very quickly. There was a theater, the Chestertown Theater, where they would show movies. And I remember going there for the first time with a couple of girls from my dorm to see the movie Alfie. I had no idea that there was special seating. So I did what I normally would do in Baltimore, and I sat downstairs with the girls. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody moved me. But when I looked around and thought, well, why are there only white people and I'm the only Black person in this theater? And I looked around, and as I looked around and looked up, I saw the balcony where all of my people were. I later learned that there was some rule or some norm or whatever you would call it, that the Blacks in the town were to sit in the balcony. I guess I was given some, I would think, license more than anything. It wasn't a privilege. It was, they didn't bother me because I was the Black at the college. And there were other incidents of that. So for the town to change as dramatically as you described, Pastor Mo, is really exciting. And I hope it continues.
So I'll jump in and comment and just say that I was really impressed that the town was able to have such a productive, intellectual, civic conversation about the issue at hand. To be frank about it, I didn't engage much, whether I supported, the murals being painted or not. I was more so focused on what's going to come after that, the policies and the real impacts. And for me, the conversation at hand showed that there is a platform to be able to have those impactful conversations about the policies to come. And without being able to have that first initial productive conversation and come together on some common ground, we'll never get to that policy impact. So that's what I was most impressed about. And in the context of the relationship of the town and college, I was also really impressed to see so many college voices involved in the conversation. Pat Nugent, Michael Harvey, Arlene Lee, so many people, stepped in to let their voices be heard, to come together with the Kent County community and really fight for something that they believe would, create some togetherness and put us on the right path forward. So I think that's just a start, and I'm glad that we're able to start off on some good common ground and have that productive conversation, because there's going to be plenty more that needs to happen in the future.
I agree. I think it just shows from my work in my last year at Washington College this year, and trying to get engaged with the community and get everyone on the same page of fighting against injustices and racism in Chestertown and on the Washington College community, this just shows that we're moving into the right step. And I say we because I think the alumni, the alums have a part in this as well. The fight isn't just for Chestertown. It starts in our own communities, but we also need to, we're also all still a part of that community, whether you're not living there now or if you still have people there or you're an alum of that college, so that still pertains to you. So I think it just shows that we are in this together. We're starting to really come together to go and fight against these issues that are large, that affect everyone each and every day.
I think I'm just really appreciative of the previous three that spoke. Each of you have been bending that arc towards a brighter future in a continuum. And I think the residue of your work is apparent in the vote. But I will say, I just think this is telling of the double-edged sword of democracy that so many of us have been unfortunately cheated out of in a way. I think it's great that it happened via that process, but a lot of those principles that hold up our democracy are the same letters and words that we've never known and never actually seen realized. So I think for me, having walked those streets as a youth and in a similar aspect as Carolyn, it's very different from the Chestertown that I came to know. And to see some of that in Chestertown, and particularly for the youth of Chestertown, is reassuring. It's not that far from the nation's capital, but one can argue the Eastern Shore and Kent County in general are a different world and very isolating. So I think having that message resounding at home will be really uplifting, both for the students that come to Washington College as well as those that have already been there, making their way through KCPS.
Yeah, I think when I first heard about the proposal of it, I think I was sort of on the same page as Darius, where I thought that, you know, it's a nice gesture, but we should be more focused on actual change and not a superficial change. And so I wasn't really thrilled about it, but after hearing a lot of people specifically from the Black community in Chestertown who were in support of it, and then seeing how well the sort of town hall and city council discussion went, which boggled my mind. I did not expect that. That was inspiring. And then on top of keeping that energy and realizing that this isn't a celebration or a monument to something that has happened. It's a sign of, or an acknowledgement of the work that needs to come. And if that is how it's really sort of portrayed, and that's how the community treats it as like a reminder of what needs to happen, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you all for your sharing your thoughts on that. And so in this, I want to ask a question back to Jalen and to Jason. And so during your research in pursuit of facts to provide historical context to the work you have been doing, were there any unexpected or surprising facts or events you discovered? If so, could you share them?
I can go first on that one. I think the better question is what wasn't surprising?
Did you have anything that was unexpected or surprising as you started digging through, finding the information? And
yeah.
Was there anything that caught you, say, oh,
everything. I mean, really, like everything that I've made work about, I essentially picked it because it was, I guess where I wouldn't say that was the case was those two pieces about blackface. I actually wasn't surprised to find those. But everything else that I've done really surprised me. Or I think one of the big things that's sort of the most consistent thing surprising me, whether it's with Washington College or Kent County altogether, is how much important history on a national level came out of the entire Eastern Shore, but specifically Kent County. I mean, we talk about, like I mentioned, the Henry Highland Garnett School. Like Henry Highland Garnett, he's a contemporary of Frederick Douglass, one of the most important 19th century Black abolitionists. For him to be from here is a big deal. Just the visitors at the college throughout the early 20th century. Caroline can talk about Julian Bond visiting, and like John Hope Franklin, who is probably the first significant, if we're not talking about Du Bois, might be the first significant African-American historian who came he first came in 1958, I believe. So there's a lot. I mean, I could go on and on, but most things have really surprised me and have been really interesting history. I mean, it's made this project sometimes really sort of sad, but really inspiring in the fact that I can show people this history and let people know about it, and it hopefully will help us in the future. I would be interested in Jalen talking a little bit about his research on the first 3 African-American graduates, because he did, in our writing, that's the one that we're on right now, and he did a little bit more research than I did on that one.
Certainly, I think for the project as a whole, a lot of my surprise and things that I didn't anticipate are more symbolic, and I'm very privileged to be holding the pen for this project centuries later. But at the very outset of some of the history that we're digging into, people that look like me were not penning their own narratives or histories. So there is very little acknowledgement, or even in some cases, a gut-wrenching acknowledgement of my ancestors. And that has been really saddening to go through again. But I think what has been uplifting is turning the spotlight on some of those lives in many battles, as Carolyn started off, that have continued over decades of time and centuries of time. And I think the weight of it all, especially right now with what our country is going through in terms of a reckoning towards justice on all levels for all peoples, is really powerful. So I've been grateful to work on the project. But with respect to the legacies of those that we're talking about today, all of them had lives before they came to Chestertown. That must be acknowledged. And the roots of their families were powerful. They might not have been in ways that we quantify power or even respected as citizens as we would like them to be, or as they are said to be on our founding documents. But the legacies that they were leaving in the places that they came from were leaps and bounds over what anything that we could have found that was published. And I think their time at Washington College is evidence of that. And even after that, I'm sure Carolyn will dig into it, but for the 3 that we have artwork of, they dedicated a lot of their lives to renourishing the communities they came from and passing on that torch to the next generation, to get in the way, to be in good trouble. And I think that has a lot to do with the environments that they were a part of, organizations and groups that they formed or that molded them, as well as what they were born with. Some of the struggles that we're dealing with now and talking about now that they inherited of no choice of their own. I think that's been the most surprising thing to me, to not have found much on that and to be giving it the light of day that it so deserves.
Thank you. And that's a good segue to those who are graduates of Washington College. And the question is, why did you choose to attend Washington College? What was it like during your time there as a Black student? And what were the challenges you faced? And I'd like for Carolyn to start, because she can give us where she started being a graduate over 50 years ago, and then leading all the way up to the most recent graduate, to Jocelyn, and then also including Darius in that conversation.
Yes, okay. I can certainly do that. And before I begin, though, I want to mention, just in the atmosphere, I want to put in the atmosphere the names of the late Bill Ennett, a graduate of 1972, Bill Prettyman, who is still with us, and Ricky Turner. They were with me during my last year at Washington College, but they were a big part of the change that we were trying to make. So Why did I choose Washington College? Actually, the funny thing is I didn't choose Washington College. Fate chose Washington College for me. All my life I had prepared to go to college. That's what I was groomed to do, groomed in my family to do that from elementary school on, groomed by my teachers to go to college. In fact, if any of you are familiar with W.E.B. Du Bois's theory of the talented 10th, I was one of those talented 10th. We had a class of students in my schools that were groomed to be that group of well-educated, upward mobility Blacks who would then return to the community and lift the community up. So my education was very deliberate in terms of the intensity of it, very deliberate in terms of the fact that we took college classes before we were in college, very intense that we were given the best teachers available to prepare us. So I had no doubt when I graduated 16th in a class of over 700 students out of Frederick Douglass High School in Baltimore, that I was prepared to go to any college that I wanted to. But my only college ambition was I wanted to go to Temple. That was in my yearbook, that I was going to Temple University in Pennsylvania to study medicine. That was my dream. So I only applied to that one school. To my great shock and surprise, I got a letter back from Temple. This was something that I don't even think my teachers figured into the equation. They prepared us for school, for college, to succeed. But never did we ever figure in or factor in the fact of racism. I got a letter back from Temple University, not saying that I wasn't qualified to be there, but only that they had reached their quota of Blacks and Jews. I was devastated. I had no second option there. And knowing the predicament that I was in, and this would have been late June by then, my guidance counselor called me and said, well, look, I think I have a solution for you. I've got this scholarship from the state to Washington College. Do you want it? Initially, I wasn't overjoyed by that. I said, well, let me think about it. I don't know, where is this Washington College? So I had to do some research to find out where it was. I came to Washington College as a second opportunity to get a college education. It was not my choice, and I thought, well, how bad could it be? I would later find out how bad it could be. And I'm sorry to say that I will have more on that later. Should I continue?
Oh, no. That was wonderful. Thank you, Darius.
Yeah, sure. So the question was why we chose Washington College, what it was like, what the challenges are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So I'm similar to Carolyn in that, I didn't choose Washington College, fate chose it. Washington College was not my first choice. I'm from Kent County, as was mentioned earlier. So like many of my peers, I was not trying to go to college right in my hometown. And actually, I only applied to 2 other colleges, I believe. And I actually didn't even finish the applications. I applied to University of Maryland, and then I applied to Drexel University. And I was told by somebody that Drexel University wouldn't really have much opportunity in the form of, diversity scholarships or resources that, support me, throughout that application process and throughout the college career. Took Drexel right off my list. So I was really at a point of just figuring out, what is the best option, and if I was going to continue with University of Maryland. And Another connection of mine, she actually suggested that I look into Washington College. She felt like I was good material for the school. And at the time, there was the Vincent Henson Scholarship that had become available, which provided an opportunity for an African-American student from Kent County High School to attend Washington College with a full tuition covered. So I applied for it, I got it, and it was a no-brainer at that point. Higher education would not be a financial burden on my family. I had a great opportunity to go to a school that had a phenomenal education. And the big benefit of it is really a family benefit. My cousin Joelle, she was the first recipient of the Vincent Henson Scholarship. So, that opportunity really created a generational impact for our family that's still in play. And this kind of segues into what it was like when I went there. But I think the most impactful thing about that scholarship for me is the fact that, the community and college were able to come together yet again to provide some opportunity for somebody like me or my cousin Joelle. So they raised money for that scholarship through the 100 Voice Choir, which put on an annual event to raise money. Literally 100 voices. I had family members on that choir, community members on that choir, family, friends, who came together to sing and rejoice and, provide an opportunity for somebody to attend that school. So that was a really powerful just representation of togetherness for me and what the town and college relationship meant. And when I went to Washington College, it was a little different. So, it's interesting, the college and town has always been one and the same, since arguably the beginning of it all. And, but the interesting thing is when you step foot into that campus, you're literally in a completely different world. So for me, I definitely dealt with kind of an identity crisis. So, on one hand, I'm within this college community, this high level of intellect, different class of people. But then, on the other hand, I'm walking around Chestertown, seeing folks I grew up with, seeing my family friends, seeing my family out. And those folks were essentially completely disconnected to what went on at the college. So it really put me in a position of, a different form of code switching, switching back and forth between being a Kent County native and then being a college student. Something that I really had to weigh, throughout my whole experience. Can't really say it got better, but it definitely gave me an appreciation, a deeper appreciation for what that relationship between the town and college meant. But I'll also say the one thing that was consistent was the experience of being a Black person at both of those communities. So the one thing that I'll say about Kent County that I'm grateful for is it actually prepared me very well to go to a place like Washington College. I often grew up in experiences where I was the only Black person in my classes, my friend groups, different opportunities like that. Or I was at least one of the only few. And going to Washington College, it was no different. So, I was already used to the subtle biases, any type of racism that might have occurred, any stereotypes, things like that. The dealing with that was innate with me at that point. And I don't know. I mean, I will say that going to Washington College, I did experience a different, heightened level of racism and understanding, what it meant to be a Black person in a predominantly white community, in a way that I hadn't experienced at Kent County High School and just throughout my public school career. But I guess I'll finish by saying that my experience is definitely different from Carolyn, I'll say, and it sounds like it's very different from Jocelyn in that I wasn't as involved in any extracurriculars or, within, clubs or things like that. I really remained behind the scenes, but did have a lot of friends. I did go out to parties and, different events like that. So I did get out and make a lot of connections. But I think the interesting thing is that I went to college during the Obama years. And during the Obama years, I feel like the perception of what it was to be a Black person in this country was a lot more accepted. It was looked at a lot differently, at least compared to how it feels today. So I feel like that made a big difference on how I was able to navigate through college from 2011 to 2015. Frankly, I would not want to be at Washington College right now with the current administration and from some of the things that I've heard about how it is there at this moment. But I do see it, going through a process of figuring out how it can transform to accommodate, new diverse voices coming in larger levels, which is not going to change. Our country's getting more diverse, in thought, race, anything. So college has to figure out how to accommodate that and work with that and make a more inclusive environment for everybody. So I hope it's going along that route. But I'll say that was my experience in a nutshell. Can talk more about it as far as how I was engaged. I'm actually more engaged as an alumni than I was as a student. So I can speak to that later if needed.
Jocelyn, do you want to speak on that topic? Because I have one thing that I want to add to the comments that I made earlier, but I'll defer to you if you want to speak on that topic, on that question.
On which topic of how it is now?
No, what it was, why did you choose the college? And yeah.
So my story is a combination of both Darius and Carolyn. So I did not choose Washington College at first as well. My first choice was Towson University. I was, like Carolyn, I was the salutatorian of my class. Me and the valedictorian were 0.01% difference. Very involved college classes when I was in high school. I was well prepared to go to any school. I applied over 21 colleges, probably got accepted to 19 of those 21. And I was ready to go to any school I wanted to. And I thought Towson would give me a full ride because I wanted to give my mother a chance, a single mom, the opportunity to relax. She's raised 2 women, and my sister went to school with Darius at Washington College, and she went on a full ride. So I said, well, I'm not going to go and give my mom loans either if Ashley already went. So my goal was to get a full ride as well. So when I got my letter back for Towson saying that I was accepted, but I didn't get into the honors program and didn't get the scholarship money that I was looking for, I had Washington College as a second choice. One, because my sister had already went and graduated from there, and I knew about the opportunities that she was given and her experience there. But also, too, because I also got the same scholarship that she did, the Hodson Trust, so I was able to attend on a full ride, so I was grateful for that. But also because they had the majors I was looking for, both Spanish and business. So my experience when I first got to Washington College, because my sister went, I had a little bit of background knowledge of the college, but I wasn't there. I was still in high school when she was there, so I wasn't there as much to really get a feel of what it was like to be at Chestertown and at Washington College, because I say that because they're kind of 2 different worlds when you're there. When I got there, it was definitely culture shock. I don't come from too far of a different type of town or place. I live in Princess Anne, Maryland, which is another area that has a lot of racism. Actually, my granddad's great uncle was lynched in our town. So I come from kind of the same background and with my community here. So it wasn't necessarily a lot of shock in that aspect, but it was shocking to me that I wasn't able to be just a college student and enjoy life as a college student. I wasn't able to just go to classes, study. As a Black student specifically, we have a lot on our plates, for one, being Black, and at a predominantly white institution, you have to make sure that you're up to par to fit in with everyone else there. But also you have financial things that you have to worry about. You have social issues that you're worrying and dealing with. So it's all of that added on there. And then to have the weight you're carrying the weight of all of the other minority students on campus with you. That was one of the most difficult things I've experienced at the school, especially so my junior year I studied abroad for the full year. So spent 2 years at Washington College, left for a year, and came back. And to pick up such a huge role as the president of the Black Student Union. I really, boy, it was something to come from being in a European country on my own for a year to come back and then have everyone's weight, and not weight that they want you to have, but weight that they, involuntary weight, that the problems that they're dealing with, that it's not fair that they have these issues on this campus and in the town. So to carry that and then to be a student and try to finish 2 theses and to do activities that I wanted to do and to enjoy my senior life and senior year, that was difficult. But I am grateful for it. It's taught me resilience and how to be professional, maintain and socialize, and also make connections. I'm grateful for the experience at Washington College, but I think one thing I want people to realize that for Black students going to this school, it's not just the opportunity to receive a nice education, because we can do that in any other college, but what we are able to do is to connect on the campus and to try to build relations and to try to give something to this campus. I think I try to, in all aspects of my life, try to leave a mark on anything that I do in any place that I go. And I think that's the task that most of the students, minority students, are given when they're attending Washington College, is to leave your mark or figure out something to change. And it's a little unfair because we aren't able to just be those college students that you just go to class, go to parties if that's what you want, but we're not able to just do that. You have to be involved, get involved, fight, and deal with problems that aren't problems that you created, problems that are institutional. But I'll explain other things with the Black Student Union and my involvement and my experience with the club and the organization in the future if the question arises. But that was my experience.
Well, I guess what I left out of my earlier statement was what it was like to be at Washington College in 1966. You know historically what Blacks were going through in the 60s, and 1966 was the height of when civil rights was really beginning to make its mark, beginning to make a noise in the country. And so when I came to Washington College, I had a tremendous cross to bear, if I can describe it that way, because I was coming into a setting that was not ready for me, was not prepared to support me, and in fact, did everything it could to discourage me. Now that might sound a whole lot different from the 2 panelists that just spoke so glowingly of their experience. But this was the truth of what was going on at the college in 1966 and before then, because I don't really believe that the college was fully prepared to welcome Black students on its campus. I was part of an experiment, and the experiment was to see, number one, if they could survive in this environment, and number two, how would white students react to their presence? And I say it was an experiment because if it were true integration of the campus, they would not have devised this absolutely draconian plan of enrolling one Black student every 2 or 3 years. What that looked like, what that became was, when I got to Washington College in 1966 as a freshman, there was only one other Black student here on his way out the door as a senior. And he was a part of that early group that Jason mentioned, the pictures that he showed. He was part of that group, although not included in those pictures, because he knew them. And from what I understand, they devised a coping strategy, those early Blacks, that said, okay, we're here just to show that, you know, we're not the boogeyman. We're going to be getting along with everybody. We're going to put our best foot forward to represent the race. And we're not going to cause any trouble. And we're not going to do anything to upset the status quo. So what that looked like actually was those early Black students never got together to do anything, to address any of the issues that were here on the campus. And they said, they actually wrote in their history that they devised some sort of a strategy called against clumping, I'll say it that way. They said, you go this way, I'll go that way. Never are we to come together as a group because that might seem to be threatening to the white people. So we'll just mix in and mingle in as best we could with the white students, and we're not to come together at all to act like we're a group. And that's what they did. And so I got the tail end of that from Marty Smith when I came here, because in an entire year, he never spoke to me. He never welcomed me. He walked around this campus as if I didn't exist. So he was treating me just like the white students were, which was kind of odd to me. And for a long time, I kind of resented that about the early students, the early Black students. But then it came to me that I understand now why they did what they did. If they had been like me, questioning authority, trying to overturn things, that experiment would have ended right there. And it might have been another 100 years before they ever looked to let another Black student into this college. So they paved the ground. They made a way for the college to think, well, this is not bad. This experiment seems to be working. So let's let more Blacks in, but let's keep it at a low, manageable number. So, you know, we can keep an eye on things. What they did with me when I came was the first thing they did was isolate me into a single room. And I say isolate me because I didn't have a roommate. And that was not the norm. Everybody had a roommate in the dorm except me. We had an L-shaped kind of floor. So they put me in a single room all the way to the end of the hallway, the last room, so nobody would ever have to see me, walk by my room, visit me if they didn't want to. Initially, I was not devastated, no, that's too harsh a word. Initially, I questioned and I was confused by that because I'm a very personable and friendly person. So I didn't understand why I was being ostracized in this way, being made kind of special, but then again, not special, you know? So every day from class, I would go to class and nobody would speak to me. Professors wouldn't call on me when I had my hand raised. Walking through campus, students would look past me, you know, as if I wasn't there, as if I were invisible. In the dining hall, I would come to eat and nobody would sit with me. It was very lonely, and yet I was around 600 and some odd people who never paid any attention to me at all. So I would go back to my dorm room for, maybe I did this for about 2 weeks, and I would just cry. It was so what I wasn't used to. And then I got myself together and I said, what can I do about this? I got to have more Black people in here to have my back. And then that's when I began my campaign to do that, which I can talk about a little later. But the thing of it is, Washington College was unprepared for Black students to come. I don't know why they made the decision, but they were unprepared and they did nothing to welcome my group or me at the time. I should just speak for myself. They did nothing to support me. They did nothing to welcome me. And most of all, they did nothing to protect me because the town I feared for my life twice in the town itself. And thankfully, you know, I figured out a way to survive that first year. That first year, I figured out a way to survive that first year. So I'll let it end at that, and we'll have more discussion on that later.
Yes, and I want to thank each of you for sharing your experiences and your challenges that you faced while at Washington College and to be able to overcome them. And you've already started sharing part of the strategies that you put together in order to either overcome or withstand the challenges that you faced. And so it just speaks to each of your inner strength, your outer strength, and just your whole way of, you know what, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to make this through this. But I'd like for you to share just one or two, more specifically, what strategies did you come up with? And Carolyn, since you finished, if you would, I know in your story you talked about embracing other people from the community to help you with that. And if you could share some of that with us today, and then for Darius and Jocelyn to share some of the strategies that they did to cope with the racism that they faced while at Washington College.
Yes, well, one of the things I figured out very early in this whole process was that being alone and being the only one was not a favored status, and that I had to find and build and embrace a community that looked like me and that would understand my struggle and my needs. And I had to find that community for myself because it wouldn't be provided to me. So the college, there were Blacks all over the college because they worked there. They worked in maintenance, they cut the grass, they worked in the kitchen, they did all those kinds of jobs. And so I made it a point to acknowledge their presence, to acknowledge them as being human beings, to speak to them. And this was not something that they were used to. I got the impression that the other Blacks that came to the college, again, they were not coupling. They were not necessarily acknowledging those people. And I became friends with the maids in my dorm, for example. Faye Stevens from Chestertown. I want to, as we say, give a shout out to Faye, who's no longer with us. But Faye Stevens was the first person that I embraced and became friends with. Another couple, I met a couple in town, Walter and Teresa Wicks, and they became my family in town, so that I was able to get away from some of the things I was going through at Washington College because I made these connections. And these people would come and get me when I felt like I needed to get away, or they would invite me to different social activities and just let me be a part of their family. But I was determined. You know, I spent a year at Washington College after Marty Smith left by myself. So it was important for me to have that community around me to support me and to motivate me. And I can honestly say that if I hadn't had them, I don't know if I would have lasted the 4 years. Not because I couldn't handle the racism or the things that were going on when I was here, but it just seemed pointless to me to put myself through all of this, and for what? I can recall that at some point I was I began to make friends with some of the white students on campus. There were probably about 3 that I would consider really important in my story. One you see behind me, that's Catherine Bass from Vermont. Catherine became a very good person for me, a very good friend, as a matter of fact. She was married and also lived on campus, but went home on the weekends. And at some point, Catherine took me home on weekends with her. You know, and I thought, wow, she really went out of her way to show herself friendly toward me. The first time I met Catherine was in a class, and we were supposed to be doing a sociology project in class, and the teacher asked us to pair up with someone to do the project. Nobody wanted to pair up with me. But Catherine spoke up and she came to me and said, Carolyn, I'll pair up with you. What are we going to do? And I looked at Catherine and I said, Catherine, I think our project will be on Black suicide. Because I had a habit of every time they gave me an assignment, I would always find a way to put it in the terms of a Black subject or whatever. I studied American literature. And my American Lit book had no Black writers, no Richard Wright, no James Baldwin. They're American. Why weren't they in the books? So when I had papers to do, comparative papers to do on certain authors or certain topics, whatever, I went for Richard Wright and James Baldwin, even though I knew my professor had never read those books. So I did what I could while I was here as the only Black student to make a way to make my own community so that I could survive.
Jocelyn Darius.
Yeah, I can go. So I'll say that I shared a similar strategy that Carolyn did in connecting with the other Black folks that were on campus. It's a little bit more different and personal for me because I actually have a lot of family members that work on campus. So just name dropping a few, Janet Thompson, my godmother, you know, she works in a dining hall. She's worked there for a very long time. So that was always a familiar face that I had. Miss Dorsey, she was, she is my one of my best friend's grandparents, and she worked at the dining hall. So that was another familiar face. Rhonda Boyer, another one in the dining hall. She grew up she lived right down the street from where I grew up. So that was another familiar face. So I was comforted in that I had familiar faces with me. And it's interesting that I say that most of them worked at the dining hall because honestly, I actually rarely ate in the dining hall. And my reason for that is I just really didn't feel that comfortable. I'm a low-key person anyway, so I prefer to stay to myself most of the time. But I just never really quite got as comfortable as I could at Washington College with just within that culture, within that environment, to just say, you know, let me go to the dining hall and just sit with a group of friends that I go to parties with, or, you know, whatever that may be. I avoided that situation. And another strategy that I had that kind of was avoiding the situation was I just straight up went home. You know, I had the luxury of going to college where I grew up. So if I ever had a need for refuge, you know, to get back to myself, to get back to my roots and feel grounded, I literally went home. And it's interesting because that's just not a luxury that everybody, you know, affords or can have, but it was a really important thing for me at various times at the college. And it was also comforting because, you know, a lot of folks in my community knew I was there. So, you know, they always voiced support for me, you know, asked how I was doing, you know, when I would see them around town, we'd catch up. So it always gave me something that, you know, made me feel like myself when I was able to go back home. Yeah, so that was how I dealt with it. I will say the one specific time where I didn't go home, where I wish I did, was during the Freddie Gray rides. And being on campus during that time was really the most awkward thing ever. And awkward, uncomfortable, frustrating, you know, the whole nine. And I say that in the context of what I meant earlier when I was talking about the Black Lives Matter murals being painted in Chestertown. You know, people were not looking beneath the surface, you know, during the Freddie Gray rides. They were focusing just on the rides, what was happening in Baltimore. And that was frustrating for me because, you know, we all, whether students or faculty, we all were at a school where we focused on critical thinking and critical theory. Yet nobody was thinking critically about why those folks were rioting in the first place. And it was just one of those moments where, you know, I had nobody to really turn to on campus about that. You know, there were very few Black people on campus when I graduated. So that was just one thing that I really had to internalize and deal with. And You know, it's just a real shame that it's like that. But I think for me, it's a testament of the work that Washington College really has to do to make sure that critical thinking is really embedded across every element of society. You know, you want to think critically about something, definitely do it about race right now, you know, like we're doing. You know, we have to, because that's where our world is going. So again, like I said, my strategies were, you know, connecting with the folks, the familiar faces that I had on campus, you know, within the community, and just went home, you know, went to, you know, where I felt most comfortable.
For me, my first strategy was to go home as well, until I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. My policy in life for myself is, if you don't like something, to change it. So for me, I really, from freshman year, I really started to say, okay, well, I don't like this. What can I do to change the situation? What can I do to help my situation or make this experience more enjoyable for me? So that meant for me, like me and my friends, to do things instead of going to the parties because we didn't feel welcome at the parties. We would just chill in our room or have fun in our room, or just do something together as a group, or go into the caf downstairs and in the game room. And then once my second semester there, I started to get really involved in the BSU. I became on the executive board. So that just led into my whole time as with the Black Student Union. So then that's where we started making changes and deciding to do things that will be impactful on the campus. And instead of complaining and just complaining about our experiences, we decided to act and to actually do things. And Taylor Johnson, she made and paved the way for the Black Student Union to be the way that it is now. She really turned it around from where it was, and then Paris Mercier built it up, and then I just took the baton, and I knew this year coming back to a lot of things that I was unaware of during my time in Spain. I was totally in a different world. To come back and to hear all of that, I knew I had to do things. I couldn't just be sitting and doing my work as a regular student. I knew I had to make changes. So my coping mechanism was to make changes and to fight and to get into those offices and get into those meeting spaces and make my voice heard and make all of our voices heard. So mine was a little bit of the other two combined.
My activism on campus, my activism as one on campus was totally unexpected by the administration, by the teachers. Nobody expected me to be like I was, you know, always questioning, always wanting to know why you can't find any more Black students who, why, you know, that's just an excuse. You know, I left 15 students in my high school class who were better qualified than me, and they were all in my class. So you can't tell me you can't find more qualified Black students. But this incident is one that brought me closest to the brink of leaving Washington College, and that's when Martin Luther King was killed. I was on campus the night that happened. I was on door duty, as a matter of fact. And I was, not only was I really heartbroken about his assassination there, but I was also very torn by the fact that the campus, Washington College, the administration was absolutely just blowing this whole thing off. All around you were hearing reports about other schools and businesses and government agencies closing for the day in mourning and in commemoration of that event. And Washington College had planned to do nothing. It was business as usual. I was livid. I marched over to the administration, and I told them, if you don't close this campus down in sympathy with all of the Black people in your employ that are in mourning at this time, if you don't close it down, you will regret it. I addressed them that way. And I found out later that they had planned a meeting of those employees. They were mostly the maintenance staff. And so I went to that meeting that morning, and the supervisor told them, he said, we're gonna close the campus, or not close the campus, but you don't have to work today. Anybody who wants to take off can take off, and we only want the essential employees to remain. This was unheard of, I guess. I don't know. A student going over there and laying down the law like this, you know, but I did that because I felt so strongly that the campus should have, that the administration should have reacted to that and should have been sensitive to that. So, and then I packed up my bags and I left, and I was thinking not coming back. But what happened when I came back, I'm trying to find, this happened on April 17th, 1968. By the way, I kept every letter that I ever wrote from Washington College is in this bag. So this is verbatim from my own files here. And I write home to my mom and I say, the president of the college called me over to his office yesterday. It seems that he heard, and in parentheses, I knew he would, about my meeting with the maintenance crew after Martin's death. And he said that he wanted to meet me because, in his words, this was a bold, courageous act. So we talked a little. He asked me if my family had been affected by the riots. I said no. And if I thought Chestertown would have a riot. I told him I wasn't that familiar with the people of Chestertown, but I didn't believe they would. He asked me how I was getting along. I asked him, do you mean academically or socially? He said both, so I told him. He asked how many were in my family. I told him 4, but my parents were divorced. He asked if this presented any problems for me. I told him no. Finally, he told me if I had any problems to feel free to stop by and see him, or words to that effect. I told him that I would, and I left. All that night, I kept thinking about our talk, and I couldn't help but feel that I gave all the wrong answers. I don't think I made a very good impression, but neither did he. Well, that probably was the only time that I ever talked to the president of Washington College. He brought me in because he wanted to see if there would be any repercussions to the college for either the assassination of Martin Luther King or what I had done going over to the maintenance crew. But as I said, that was the closest that I had come to really being fed up with being at the college and thinking that this was the last straw and that I would never come back. They called me when I was home. I was home for about a week. And they called and they asked my mom, they said, I actually went to Martin Luther King's funeral, so I was in Atlanta at the time. When I got home, my mom said, the college called. I said, what did they say? They said, is she coming back? And I said, you bet I am. I'm coming back because I'm not finished. I got more work to do.
That's awesome. I just, and just looking at the comments that are coming up on Facebook, and then just hearing people's response and just saying, wow, amazing story, sad, but it shows each of your resilience in what you had to face. And so I'm gonna share a couple of comments that have come across in the Q&A. And then also for those who are attendees, if they would like to share, so if they have some questions, you can take this time to put your questions in the Q&A. But this is from Kathleen James, and I hope I don't pronounce your name incorrectly, Chakraborty. She says, John Hope Franklin came because he was a good friend of the University of Maryland. a professor with whom my stepfather, Guy Goodfellow, had studied. Goody ensured that he was eventually honored by the college. I can't remember whether it was an honorary degree or not, but I know that it was one of the things of which Goody was most proud of. He was the first person to teach African American history at the college. And this again is from Kathleen, and she's the daughter of Norman James. Then we have a question from Heather Harvey. She says, thank you all so much for sharing your stories. Carolyn, your story is painful and completely unjust. There should have been more adults looking out for you and taking responsibility. A question for all of you who studied at the college. Knowing what you know now, would you have decided to study elsewhere? What do you wish the people around you did differently?
I'll go first. Jocelyn, you can go.
I would say I'm a spiritual person, and I believe that everything happens for a reason, and your journey is your journey. So I think I would choose Washington College again, because I think it's built me, and I gave something to that campus as well. So I would, even though I went through some things and experienced things that I wish I would never experience and that other students didn't as well, I think there was a purpose for me to attend Washington College. So I would choose Washington College again. And I'm grateful for my education. I received an amazing education, met amazing people. But something I wish that people did differently was to speak up when you see things are wrong. Right is right and wrong is wrong. No matter what if you're scared or afraid, the person that is on the receiving end of that is scared and afraid. So speak up when it's wrong, when you see something wrong. There are many instances where people knew that some of the things that were happening and they were their friends and they didn't say anything. So I just wish people would do what they would want others to do for them. Also, for the people in the community and the other professors and faculty and staff at the college to fight for minorities, not only minority students, but minority staff and professors to be on the campus. Like Carolyn said, Washington College still isn't equipped to welcome a large group of Black students or minority students. It wasn't then, and they still aren't now, because when you're in a classroom and you're the only Black student and your professor, you have only 2 Black professors in the entire campus, you're not able to relate. You're not able to gain insight from someone who looks like you. You're not able to, the only person or the only people that you're able to connect to are your peers. And I think the college has a lot of work to do, but I think that's one of the biggest things that I would say I wish people would do differently, is to fight for those changes, get more minority faculty, staff, and persons of color into these higher up positions.
I don't consider my time at Washington College to be a sad chapter in my life. Yes, I was very upset by some of the things that I faced here, but I made good use of my time because I tried as best I could to change the culture of the college. Now, back in 1966, that was not easy to do, and being one Black student here, also not easy. But I worked to keep the pressure on to bring more Black students in. And by I believe it was the beginning of my junior year, and then certainly in my senior year, the college had finally begun a serious recruiting campaign, serious only in terms of they stopped the one every 2 or 3 years kind of experiment and began to allow Blacks to come in larger numbers. I'll say 8 was the top when I came, but that was significant progress, I think, and I made a point of trying to make sure that I welcomed those students and tried to give them some idea of what to expect and what not to expect. And that's how we ended up getting together in the first Black student, or what we called ourselves the African American Student Association. And as was mentioned earlier, Julian Bond came on campus, and we took advantage of that opportunity to give him an honorary membership on stage in front of all those white people who were in the audience. We gave him a membership, honorary membership in our group. But more importantly, what establishing that group did for us was to bring us together in a common effort, a common ground, a common purpose, you know, and not just to be disjointed and uncoupled and that kind of thing. Yes, we ate together as a group. Yes, we walked along campus as a group. We weren't exclusive to each other because I had white friends and they had white friends, and we were socializing as best we could with people who wanted to be around us. So we did have our presence on campus, and we made a significant, I think, contribution to this campus, because many of these white students had never been in contact with Black students or Black people in general. They grew up not even having Black friends, not even living in integrated neighborhoods, not even. So when they saw us and when they allowed themselves to socialize or even just be around us, we were able to show them that we're human and normal and go through the same kinds of things and have the same issues and the same hopes and dreams like you do, you know? And this was something that they had not experienced before. So if anything, during my time at Washington College, I made being Black normal for them. Some accepted that, some didn't, but I didn't worry about the ones who didn't accept it. I just kept being who I was and just trying to be the best person on campus that I could be, that I was allowed to be. But, you know, there were pockets of racism, pockets of discrimination, pockets of people who did things to us, and we basically endured it. You know, I had a woman that used to follow me around campus, and I'm going to give her I'm going to give her a shout out too, Marty Shrewsbury. I called her the Shrew. Every time she met me on campus, she'd make her way to me and say, you know, you don't belong on this campus. I don't even know why you're here. Why do you stay here? Why do you take all of this? You should go home. That was her line every single time that I ran across her, you know. And I was just, you know, I didn't respond. I didn't get angry about it because I knew that she was not my purpose here. She was not the one that I came here, the reason that I came here. And so I'm proud of the fact that, yes, we started the group, the African American Student Association. We had a list of demands that we made to President Gibson at that time. We specifically asked that they hire a Black faculty member, that there should be Black faculty members in this school. We said that they, and there is at least one or two now. We said that there should be students from Kent County that should be allowed to come to this school. And there was a fellow by the name of, what's the first one? His name was Commodore. He was the first Black student that came to Washington College, to my knowledge, from Kent County. We said that when Black students would come, there should never be a situation like mine where I found myself isolated by myself in a room by myself, but that Black students should be admitted to the school and be given and be allowed to have Black roommates. As in the first year, if they wanted to depart from that, they could, but in the first year, we were going to take them under our wing, and we were going to make sure that they were acclimated and made comfortable and welcome for coming here. And that's what they did. I didn't have a roommate for 3 years, and I accepted my first roommate, a young Black girl from South Carolina, in my senior year. I don't remember all of the demands that we made, but we made demands that eventually were acted upon, you know, for the time that we were here. So that's what I'm proud of, that we were able to do that.
And with that, I'm going to chime in this question since.
Pastor Davis, you mind if I jump in really quick?
Oh no, go ahead, Darius. Sorry.
No, no worries, no worries. Well, first I gotta say, Carolyn, it's tough to follow you. your experience at the college is unmatched. But thank you for being one of those folks that paved the way for, you know, someone like me or Jocelyn to be able to attend Washington College. Really, I do appreciate that. Yeah, I gotta say that for me, like, I choose Washington College over and over again for many reasons. I think the most important reason for me is that it prepared me to navigate a lot of the spaces that I'm in now. In a lot of the spaces I'm in now, I am the only Black person. Only Black person in boardrooms, conference rooms, you know, on stages presenting, you know, different topics that I work with every day. And I'm really appreciative of an experience that allowed me to foster my own thoughts and my own experiences to prepare me for that, future of that. And also, it gave me a chance to really understand a full experience of what it is like growing up in Kent County, because, again, Washington College is an integral part of Kent County, and vice versa. You know, it goes both ways, but it's an experience that a lot of folks from Kent County don't get to experience. So to grow up in Kent County and to not engage in Washington College is to essentially lose out on the part of the life that's around you. So I'm really appreciative that I was able to get that full experience. But the one thing I do want to say, that as far as, I think with your question you asked, what could others have done differently to help out? I don't really want to point the finger at others. I really want to point the finger to myself. So, you know, you listen to this whole conversation, Jocelyn and Carolyn were super engaged in a lot of activism and things that they could do to make the college a more inclusive place for people like us. I didn't do that. I acknowledge, you know, what was happening on campus, you know, the Black Student Union. Jocelyn, I know Ashley was involved with that, and please give her my best. You know, it was great to know her during school. But you know, I went through school at a time where I really was not in touch with my culture and myself at all. You know, I am, you know, a pretty whitewashed Black person. You know, I grew up with white culture all around me. So I wasn't able to really dig into who I was at Washington College enough compared to how I have, you know, these past several years. So if I could go back, I would have spent more time getting in touch with my culture, myself, you know, engaging in those groups that were fighting to make the college a more inclusive place for people like us. So like I said, I don't want to point the finger at anybody else. You know, I know I could have made a bigger difference, but, you know, I'll work on that now.
Thank you. What are some of the thoughts that you have, you know, because you all have shared in regards to some pieces about the local community, and then the Black community, or the local Black community, and then the Black community on campus. And then how do you see those two working together to help improve the conditions, not only at Washington College when it regards to racism, but then also how Washington College can help with the racism that is present in Chestertown and in Kent County, Maryland?
So for me, it takes strong leadership. I mean, it's common knowledge that Washington College has transitioned leadership a lot, you know, since I've graduated at least, and a little bit before that. And to really develop a strong leadership or a strong relationship with anybody, you can't come in and out of the relationship. So I really think the college needs a solid, you know, stable period of leadership to really develop a strong connection with the local community that's going to create some sustainable impact. And I know for the scholarship that I received and that my cousin Joelle received, that was a result of strong leadership. Barrett Tipson, who said, you know, let's do something. Do something for the local community, the local African-American community, and get some of these kids on campus. You know, I can't say he was the sole person that came up with that idea, but I know he was a strong voice in it that pushed it forward. And I just think with a lot of what's happening right now, you really can't make any strong headway without solid, sustainable leadership. That's got to come into play.
I agree with Darius. And I also think it takes people to want to build the connection and more effort. I know a lot of the times when we were doing the protest, some people were unaware of what was going on with the students on campus, and they really did not know. And vice versa with the high school students, what they were receiving and the racism that they were dealing with, we on the campus don't know. It's like I mentioned earlier that life at Washington College is different than life in Chestertown. It's like there's a huge disconnect when you leave off of Washington College, Washington Avenue. You're essentially moving into a different territory, and there needs to be some connection between a liaison between the town and the college to continue to bring and build that relationship and foster that relationship in all aspects, in community projects, community outreach, in education, bringing the high school students onto the campus and the college campus. We rarely see them. I think I've never seen any Kent County students come onto campus until my senior year, when the students talking about race came onto campus. So there needs to be more effort on both parties. It's not the point blames at one or the other. It's both. The campus and the community have to do better to work together to build this relationship.
Okay, and then
I've said, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead, Karen.
I have said this in the past, and I will say it again. Make no mistake, Washington College is a historically white institution, and it will always be that way. It will never change. That's its focus. That's where it gets its life. That's where it gets its reputation. So when Black students come to Washington College, that's the fundamental thing that they should understand. That does not mean that they should not involve themselves in the life of the college, but they must also involve themselves in the life of the community. They must embrace the community because you represent, I don't know, it's kind of to the young people coming up and going through school who might have never seen anyone in their family go to college. You are a role model in that sense. And we need to involve ourselves also in that community. I reached out to the community. The community didn't reach out to me. And I think that has to change. If the community knows that these Black students are on campus, they ought to reach out and let them know you're welcome to be among us if you so choose. There was a Baptist minister, a white Baptist minister on campus who held dinners every Monday. He came to campus to have dinner with the Black students. Scratch that. He came to campus every Monday to have dinner with Baptist students who just happened to be mostly white students. And I was the only Black Baptist on campus. But he provided for me a way to socialize with somebody, to have a meal with a group of people instead of eating alone. So I joined the Baptist Student Association that he formed just to be able to have dinners with them and to do things with them and to attend his church because he reached out. What if Bethel reached out? What if some of the other organizations, Black organizations in Chestertown reached out? There has to be a mutual kind of a reaching out so that they know that you're there. Because if I hadn't made the effort, nobody was coming to do it, coming to do it, for me. And so because Washington College is a white institution, it still needs to have the presence of Black students there to make it a truly liberal arts education.
Thank you. As we begin to wrap up, we realize that there's a lot of work that we all have to do to make life better for the students of color at Washington College, as well as those in the community. There's always room for improvement, and now the challenge has been put forth for us to do better. And so as we prepare to close and wrap up with some final comments from each panelist, I want you to also, if there, one of the questions that came up, were there any administrators or faculty members who served as reliable allies on campus? So I would ask if you have anybody that you would like to please share their name when you give your final comments. And then for Jason and Jalen, in regards to the all the letters and correspondence that and communication that Carolyn has kept, that her mother kept for her, those letters, is it possible for those to be part of the work? You know, specifically that letter she said that she wrote to the president, potentially to be a part of what the work you're putting together.
Absolutely. Actually, while Caroline was talking about it, I actually, while all this is going on, I messaged Pat Nugent and said that Pat Nugent at the Star Center needs to contact Caroline about these letters, because not only, I mean, absolutely, this would be a really easy sort of addition to my project, but also to me, I think they'd be an essential part of the college's archive, at least having digital copies of them. That King one is profound. So yes, absolutely. And also I should mention, you mentioned the list of demands that you made with the African American Student Association. Actually, that already is going to be, that list will be in the project next to the list that the BSU presented literally 50 years to the year apart. So comparing those two documents, I think, is really important for the project. So I'll be doing that. So real quick, I'll give my sort of closing. This has been really wonderful. It's been really interesting to hear this cross-generational experience at Washington College. And then I think all the sort of contributions everybody's made. Not only is it helping the work that I'm finishing up and getting done, and me and Jalen, but I think it also, you guys really, for the faculty and students and community members that are listening, I think that you guys gave them some really good and great information for them to help create change. I mean, these are things that I think people are going to be excited about trying to do to try to make things better in the community and at the college. So really appreciate everybody being here and contributing.
Well, the question was, would someone else like to go? I don't want to hog the screen, please.
I'll be quick. So to the question about allies on campus, I believe he's still here in the participants as an attendee, but I want to give a shout out to Dr. Michael Harvey. Michael Harvey, he was my advisor while I was at Washington College as a business management student, but him and I have a pretty long relationship, actually. So he actually taught chess to local youth, and he would go to Union United Methodist Church way out in Coleman and teach chess to us every Saturday. So I credit him for that. You know, him and his wife, Sabine Harvey, they also started a nonprofit organization called Imagination Alley back when I was in, I don't know, some point between first and third grade is what I remember. And that was just another impactful experience that I had as a youth. So to have those experiences with him then to go to Washington College and have him there again as a familiar face, somebody who helped me navigate, my academic experience there was really, really impactful. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in the whole debate about whether we should paint, these murals on the streets of Chestertown, he pops up again and gives, an eloquent, very important and much needed history lesson on the Black experience in Kent County as his testimony as to why we should paint those murals on the Chestertown streets. So Michael Harvey always has been and continues to be a great role model and an ally for me, and just generally a friend. So I know he's on here, so much love to you, Michael Harvey. And aside from that, I just want to say that I would love to keep having these conversations on an ongoing basis. I think it's really, really important. It's a time where people are ready to listen, have productive conversations about this stuff. We don't have to keep it under wraps or anything. So let's make it a regular occurrence. And the last thing is really a request for you, Jason, but please, retell the story of Vincent Henson. Like I said, he had a major impact on me, my cousin Joyelle. His scholarship continues to send kids from Kent County High School to Washington College. He lobbied to have, Garnett changed back to Henry Highland Garnett Elementary. There's plenty of community testimonials from people who actually got the chance to meet him and, be under his tutelage as a teacher. I unfortunately never had the opportunity to meet him. But his narrative is also a really critical part of this conversation too. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm glad to be a part of this.
I guess in the real world and in thinking about my Washington College experience, I can honestly say that I'm grateful for the education that I got when I wasn't being an activist. Most of my time was spent, though, trying to change the culture. So I didn't really have a true college experience. And I miss that because when I talk to my friends back home, and I know that they went to historically Black colleges and they were able to join sororities and fraternities. They were able to participate in the social life of their schools. They were able to meet their lifelong partners and have lifelong friends. And I didn't get to do any of that. I didn't get to do any of that because, number one, I wouldn't have been allowed to as a Black person in many cases. And I didn't want to because I didn't think that I would be welcomed. There were signs there that I wouldn't be welcomed. So I spent most of my time being an activist. And for what little I was able to accomplish in the short 4 years I was there, I think the thing that I draw from most is the fact that I had a successful career. I had a successful opportunity in terms of Washington. The name Washington College opened doors. Being a graduate of Washington College, however difficult it was, opened a lot of doors of opportunity. And so for that, I am eternally grateful, even though it was hard getting to that point. But if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't. But such as it is, like Jocelyn said, sometimes we're fated to be there for such a time as this. And I was chosen. So I did my best.
And I just want to say thank you all for having me. I agree with Darius. We need to continue to have these conversations. There are plenty of allies that I can name, but a few, Pat Nugent is a really, really good ally. Thank you, Pat, for all of your work. Dr. Delana, hold on, I'm getting ready to mess it up. Dr. Elena De Anda, there we go. She's amazing, and she has done a lot of good work for us as well. The advisor for the Black Student Union, Ms. Arnika, there's plenty. And in the community, Paul too, and Miss Doncella, great allies and great people to reach out to the Black students that are listening to this. Those people, you need to continue to reach out to them to help with your journey and your experience. They're always there. And there are other allies as well. And if you want to be an ally, there are plenty of people that you can reach out to, that if you want to help make the experience better for students, they need your help and they're willing to accept any help that you're willing to give. So thank you, guys.
I think I'm blessed to have been a part of this and be among a lot of trailblazers across decades, as we can see, and to even be collaborating with such talented artists. But I will say what I'm going to raise in my final comments is the soil of Kent County. And I think it's the soil of resilience, as many people have said, and a lot of revolutionaries. And unfortunately, we know lots of revolutionaries that don't necessarily look like those that are on this panel, the silhouette in particular. And I think Chestertown is the entry point as soon as you cross the Chester River. But Bucktown has been raised, Big Woods have been raised, Sharptown has been raised, and Wharton as well. There is so much that comes from the lives that Jason and I are raising in this project. And I think they are just as exemplary as those that have been written about for generation after generation. So we are definitely taking all the comments that have been raised by the panelists on this at heart, as well as those that have been raised by those that are listening or just merely attending. So I'm really appreciative that you got to listen in on this conversation that has been recorded, but I'm sure has occurred many times before today. Thank you all for attending, and all the best.
And I just want to say thank you to all of you for having me to be a part of your conversations and your work, and to thank you for doing the work that you are doing, for sharing your stories and to sharing your truths with authenticity that pierced the hearts and souls of all of us who have been listening here today. We wanted to be, we have been present in this moment. And we just thank you for being who you are. And we are now challenged to make a difference and to be that voice to the ones who are the voiceless, and to be the voice to speak truth to power, to make a difference, not just now, but in the days to come. So I thank you. I'm humbled to be a part of this experience, and thank you for allowing me to enter into your stories and into your work.
So before we conclude today's event, I too would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for your generosity, courage, your honesty, your stories, your perspectives, your insights, everything that you have offered to everyone watching today is so very valued and so important. So I thank Reverend Davis for moderating this conversation, Jason and Jalen for the work that you are doing that is so vital, and to the panelists, Carolyn and Jocelyn and Darius, for being here with us today. It just means so much. So thank you all. I'd also like to just remind anyone watching that the exhibition will be opening up October 20th on the Chesapeake Heartland website. We are working on more community conversations to keep the dialogue going surrounding the work and these vital issues. And also we do have a talk scheduled that Jason will give on October 27th. So there will be more info to come, more events, and as the project evolves, please do follow Chesapeake Heartland on Facebook and Instagram, Cole Gallery on Facebook and Instagram, or follow Jason Patterson on Instagram, or all of the above. On that note, thank you on behalf of Chesapeake Heartland and Cole Gallery and Washington College for being here with us today.